At 2:13 a.m., my phone vibrated against the wooden nightstand. That detail matters because I remember staring at the clock afterward, watching the numbers glow in the dark like they were mocking me. I remember thinking it was too late for anything good to happen and too early for anything honest. I almost didn't look. I was half asleep, wrapped in that shallow, anxious kind of rest you get in your 30s, when your body is tired, but your mind never shuts off. I'd been dreaming about my childhood home. The smell of coffee. My mother humming off-key. My father's boots by the door. Safe, familiar things. Then the vibration. Not a call. A message. I reached over, annoyed, already rehearsing the irritation I'd feel if it was spam or some distant cousin posting political nonsense again. The screen lit up my face in pale blue. Facebook Messenger. Message request. From someone I didn't know. Her profile picture was a woman about my age. Dark hair. Tired eyes. No filters. No smile. Just a face that looked like it had learned how to wait. The message was short. Too short. Hi. I'm really sorry to contact you like this. I've gone back and forth for weeks. But I think we share the same mother. I sat up in bed. My heart didn't race. It dropped. Like my body had recognized danger before my brain could label it. I reread the sentence. Once. Twice. Again. Slower this time. We share the same mother. I laughed. A single breath of sound. Sharp and nervous. No, I whispered to the empty room. I was 32 years old. I had a mother. A very real one. A woman who texted me every Sunday morning to ask if I was eating enough vegetables. A woman who cried when I moved out of state and still mailed me birthday cards written in cursive. This was ridiculous. I locked my phone and lay back down, pressing it against my chest like I could physically stop it from doing damage. My brain started assembling explanations, logical, comforting ones. A scam. Mistaken identity. Someone with mental health issues. A typo. But curiosity is a cruel thing. It doesn't ask permission. It waits. 30 seconds later, I unlocked the phone again. I opened her profile. Her name was Lauren Hale. She had public photos. Not many. A few landscapes. A dog. One picture of her standing beside a man I assumed was her husband. The comments were sparse. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed liar or con artist. I scrolled further. Her hometown stopped me. It was the same city where I was born. That didn't mean anything, I told myself. Plenty of people are born in the same city. Still, my mouth felt dry. I clicked back to the message. No follow-up. No explanation. Just that single sentence, hanging there like a loaded question. I typed and deleted at least 5 responses. You have the wrong person. This is inappropriate. Who are you? Please don't contact me again. I settled on something neutral. Hi. I think you might be mistaken. The reply came faster than I was prepared for. Too fast. I was hoping you'd say that. I thought the same thing for a long time. My stomach twisted. I stared at the blinking cursor, feeling something unfamiliar crawl up my spine. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. She continued. I'm not trying to hurt you. I didn't believe it either until I did a DNA test. My breath caught. I had taken a DNA test once. Years ago. One of those Christmas gifts you buy yourself after seeing too many commercials. I'd skimmed the results, laughed about being mostly European, bookmarked the page, and forgotten about it. I matched with someone listed as close family. That person turned out to be you. I stood up. The bedroom suddenly felt too small, too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator down the hall sounded loud, intrusive, like it was listening. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street was empty. Yellow streetlights. Parked cars. Normal life continuing without me. That's not possible, I typed. I'm not adopted. There it was. The sentence I had never questioned before. 3 dots appeared immediately. I didn't think I was either. My chest tightened. I told myself to stop. To block her. To go back to bed. To pretend this never happened. But another message came through before I could decide. Can I tell you what I know? And if I'm wrong, I'll disappear. I didn't respond. Instead, my mind betrayed me. It drifted backward to moments that suddenly felt off. My mother's habit of avoiding stories about labor. The way baby photos started abruptly, not gradually. The fact that I had no hospital bracelet, no newborn pictures with her face swollen and exhausted. Things I had never questioned because love fills in gaps so convincingly. I squeezed my eyes shut. This was stupid. I typed, "Okay, tell me." The message that followed was longer. I was born in 1989. Same hospital as you. Same city. My birth mother's name is listed as unknown on my original records, but I got access to sealed files after my adoptive parents passed. There was another baby girl born 2 days after me. Same case number. Different last name. My hands started shaking. The social worker wrote that the babies were placed separately per request. Placed. Separately. Per request. I felt like I was falling through something invisible. I sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of how fast my heart was beating, how loud the blood sounded in my ears. I don't know what that means, I typed. That doesn't involve me. There was a pause this time. Longer. Then, I didn't think it involved you either. Until your name came up. She sent a screenshot. A blurred image of a DNA match page. My name was circled in red. Relationship probability, half-sibling. The room tilted. I pressed my fingers into my thigh, grounding myself in pain, in something physical. No, I said aloud. My parents wouldn't do that. They couldn't. They were good people. Loving people. They had raised me with care, with attention, with sacrifice. They were not the kind of people who lied about something like this. I typed furiously. This test can be wrong. People share DNA all the time. She didn't argue. I know. That's what I told myself for months. That's why I waited. I didn't want to be the person who ruins someone's life with a theory. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because it acknowledged what I was already feeling. That my life, my real life, was fragile. I'm not asking for anything, she added. I just needed you to know why I reached out. I stared at the screen. Then I did something I will regret for the rest of my life. I asked the question. Who is your birth mother? There was a long pause. So long I thought she might not answer. Finally. I don't know her name. Another pause. But I know what happened. My throat tightened. She was young. She wasn't supposed to have twins. Something went wrong. Someone decided it would be easier if the babies were separated. Twins. The word echoed in my head, loud and hollow. I stood up again, pacing now, my thoughts colliding with each other. This was insane. I was not a twin. I had never been told I was a twin. My mother would have told me, wouldn't she? I thought of her laugh, her voice, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. I typed one final message. I need time. She responded immediately. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I locked the phone and set it face down on the dresser, like it was something dangerous, something that might bite if I looked at it again. Then I did what I always did when things felt overwhelming. I called my mother. It rang 4 times. She answered, groggy. Sweetheart? Is everything okay? Her voice was warm, familiar, safe. Tears filled my eyes without warning. Yeah, I said. I just couldn't sleep. A pause. You sound strange, she said softly. Are you sick? I swallowed. No, just tired. She hummed, the way she always did when she was thinking. Try to rest, she said. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow. The words suddenly felt loaded. Mom, I said, before I could stop myself. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you remember the day I was born? There it was. Silence. Not the warm kind. The kind that stretches. She started, then stopped. Why would you ask that now? I closed my eyes. I don't know, I said. Can you tell me? Another pause. Well, she said carefully, it was a long time ago. My chest tightened. I know, I said. But what do you remember? She exhaled. Honey, it's late. Let's talk about this another time. That was the moment. The first crack. The instant something inside me shifted, quietly but permanently. Okay, I said. We hung up. I sat on the bed in the dark, staring at nothing, my phone still face down like it held a secret too heavy to lift. At 2:13 a.m., a stranger had sent me a message. By 3:02 a.m., I knew, without proof, without confirmation, that something fundamental about my life was wrong. And no matter how badly I wanted to go back to sleep, I knew I never would again. I didn't sleep. I lay on my back until the sky outside the window faded from black to that dull, bluish gray that means morning is coming whether you're ready or not. Every time I closed my eyes, the same words replayed themselves over and over, like a bruise you keep pressing just to see if it still hurts. We share the same mother. By the time my alarm went off, my body felt heavy, poisoned by exhaustion. I turned it off without getting up and stared at the ceiling, noticing a faint crack near the corner I'd somehow never seen before. I wondered how long it had been there. I wondered how many other things I'd walked past my entire life without noticing. I checked my phone. No new messages. No new messages. Part of me was relieved. Another part felt abandoned, like I'd been pushed into deep water and the person who shoved me had already walked away. I showered, letting the water burn my skin hotter than usual, trying to wash off the feeling that something had crawled under it. I told myself, out loud, that this was nothing. A coincidence. A mistake. People lied on the internet every day. Still, my hands shook when I tried to make coffee. At work, I stared at my computer screen and absorbed nothing. Emails blurred together. My coworkers' voices sounded distant, like they were coming from the end of a long tunnel. Someone asked if I was okay, and I smiled automatically and said I was just tired. That was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Lauren, I just want you to know I'm not expecting anything from you. I remember how it felt when I first found out. The disbelief is crushing. Crushing. That word settled somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my browser and searched. DNA half-sibling match wrong. False positive DNA test. Shared DNA strangers. I clicked article after article, clinging to every line that suggested error, statistical anomalies, lab mistakes. I ignored the ones that didn't. Confirmation bias, I would later learn, is a powerful form of self-defense. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't planned to. My body just turned the steering wheel in that direction, like muscle memory had taken over. Their house sat on the same quiet street it always had, white siding, trimmed hedges, the porch light already on even though it wasn't dark yet. Home. Or at least, it had always felt that way. My mother opened the door before I knocked. "There you are," she said, smiling too quickly. I was just about to call. Something about the way she looked at me made my stomach drop. Not guilt. Not fear. Alertness. Like she'd been waiting. "Hi," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something baking. Normal. Comforting. My chest tightened with the sudden urge to cry. My father was in the living room, watching the news with the volume low. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, kiddo. Kiddo." I sat at the kitchen table while my mother fussed with mugs, pouring tea I hadn't asked for. She kept her back to me, moving just a little too fast. I watched her hands. They were steady. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you remember when I asked you about the day I was born?" Her shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "I told you," she said, still facing the counter. "It was a long time ago." "I know," I said. "But can you try?" She turned around then, mug in hand, and set it in front of me. "You were healthy," she said. "That's what matters." "That's not what I asked." My father cleared his throat from the other room. "Why are we digging this up?" he said. "Is something wrong?" I looked at him. Was there anything unusual about my birth? Silence. The clock above the stove ticked loudly. My mother sat down across from me, folding her hands. "You're imagining things," she said gently. "Everyone gets curious about their past sometimes." Imagining. The word landed wrong. "I'm not imagining anything," I said. "I just want details." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've always had an active imagination," she said lightly. "You remember that?" I stared at her. That was new. That was a rewrite. "I'm not a child," I said. "Please don't talk to me like one." Her smile tightened. "Why are you being so aggressive?" she asked. Aggressive. Another word placed carefully, deliberately. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. "I'm not being aggressive," I said. "I'm confused." She reached across the table and touched my hand. The contact made my skin crawl. "You're tired," she said softly. "You work too much. Stress does things to people." There it was. The shift. The subtle suggestion that the problem wasn't the question, but me. I pulled my hand away. "Did you adopt me?" I asked. The words hung in the air like smoke. My father stood up. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Where's this coming from?" "Just answer me," I said, my voice shaking now despite my effort to keep it steady. "Did you adopt me?" My mother laughed. A short, startled sound. "Oh, honey," she said. Why would you even ask that? Because a stranger told me she might be my sister. Because my DNA says something is wrong. Because my entire life suddenly feels like a performance. But I said none of that. Because I need to know, I said. She leaned back in her chair and looked at me like she was studying something broken. You're our daughter, she said slowly. We raised you. We loved you. Isn't that enough? That wasn't an answer. I didn't ask if you loved me, I said. I asked if you adopted me. Her face hardened. Why are you doing this? She asked. Why are you trying to hurt us? Hurt them. I felt dizzy. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I said. I just want the truth. My father stepped closer, his voice low. There is no other truth, he said. You were born to us. Something in his tone made my stomach sink. Not conviction. Finality. I stood up. Okay, I said. Then prove it. They both looked at me. Show me pictures, I said. Hospital records. Anything. My mother's lips parted slightly. I don't know where those things are, she said. You don't know where your own birth records are? I asked. Her eyes flashed. You're being disrespectful. Disrespectful. Another deflection. I'm leaving, I said. She stood up abruptly. Don't do this, she said. Don't tear this family apart over something ridiculous. Ridiculous. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, shaking, my chest heaving as if I'd run a mile. I felt small, unsteady, like the ground beneath me had softened into something unreliable. That night, I replayed the conversation again and again. The pauses, the deflections, the way every question had been turned back on me. I opened my phone. Lauren had sent another message. I'm sorry if reaching out made things worse. I know how it feels when people start treating you like you're unstable instead of answering. I stared at the screen. That was exactly what it felt like. I typed. My parents say I'm imagining things. Her reply came slowly this time. Mine said that too. I felt tears spill over, hot and sudden. They told me I was ungrateful, dramatic, that I was hurting them. My chest ached. What if they're right? I typed. What if I'm destroying everything for nothing? There was a pause. Then, if nothing was wrong, they wouldn't be afraid of questions. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Afraid. I hadn't wanted to think of my parents that way. But fear explains silence better than love does. That night, I dreamed I was standing in front of a mirror, but my reflection lagged behind, moving a second too late. When I reached out to touch the glass, it shattered, and the woman on the other side whispered my name like she was warning me. I woke up gasping. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, not because of lies I believed, but because of truths no one would say out loud. And the worst part was this. The more they denied it, the more alone I felt. And the more certain I became that I had been living inside someone else's version of my life. Once doubt takes root, it doesn't stay quiet. It multiplies. I stopped asking my parents questions after that night, not because I believed them, but because I realized questions were dangerous. They didn't bring answers. They brought tension, accusations, subtle punishment. Phone calls grew shorter. Texts went unanswered for hours instead of minutes. When my mother did respond, her tone had changed. Less warmth. More caution. As if I were the unstable one now. That shift did something to me. It rewired my instincts. I stopped looking outward for reassurance and turned inward instead. Toward facts. Toward records. Toward things that couldn't smile at me while hiding something behind their eyes. I started with the DNA test. I logged back into the account I hadn't touched in years. The password reset alone made my palms sweat. When the page finally loaded, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure I could hear it. There it was. Lauren Hale. Predicted relationship, half-sibling, 25% shared DNA. 25%. That wasn't a rounding error. That wasn't coincidence. I clicked deeper, scrolling through shared segments, chromosomes highlighted in bright colors like evidence under fluorescent lights. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. This wasn't nothing. I ordered a second DNA test from a different company that same night. Paid extra for expedited processing. Then a third, because some part of me believed that if I gathered enough data, the truth might change its mind. While I waited, I began pulling at threads. I requested a copy of my birth certificate from the state. That should have been simple. It wasn't. The website told me my request was under review. Days passed. Then a week. When I finally called, the woman on the phone spoke in a carefully neutral tone. There appears to be a delay due to incomplete original documentation, she said. Incomplete how? I asked. I'm not authorized to provide specifics, she replied. You may need to submit additional identity verification. I hung up feeling cold. Incomplete documentation. I had lived 32 years with an identity that now required verification. I drove to the hospital listed on my birth certificate the following weekend. It had been renamed twice since then, absorbed into a larger healthcare system. The building itself was still there, older, quieter, like it had learned too many secrets. At the records desk, I gave my name. The clerk typed slowly, squinting at the screen. I don't see anything under that date, she said. I swallowed. Could it be under my mother's name? I asked, naming her. She tried again. Nothing. Are you sure this is the correct hospital? She asked. Yes, I said. It's on my birth certificate. She pursed her lips. Sometimes adoptions are processed differently, she said carefully. Records may be sealed. My heart lurched. I'm not adopted, I said automatically. She met my eyes, and something unspoken passed between us. I see, she said. Then I'm not sure how to help you. I left with my hands numb, gripping the steering wheel as if it might disappear too. That night, I called Lauren. It was the first time I'd heard her voice. She sounded like I expected, steady, cautious, carrying weight she hadn't asked for. They told me my records were sealed too, she said quietly. I had to file a petition. It took months. Why? I asked. Why would they do that? She exhaled. Because someone didn't want questions. I closed my eyes. We compared timelines. Birth dates. Hospital names. Social worker codes. Everything lined up too well. Too neatly. The second DNA test results arrived a week later. Same result. Half-sibling. The third confirmed it. By then, denial wasn't an option anymore. What replaced it was something darker. Obsession. I started cataloging memories like evidence. Writing things down. Comparing notes with Lauren late into the night. Did your parents ever talk about pregnancy cravings? Did you see ultrasounds? Did anyone mention complications? My answers were always the same. No. 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 I remembered being told I was a miracle baby, that my mother had trouble conceiving, that doctors said it might never happen. At the time, it sounded romantic. Now it sounded rehearsed. I visited my aunt, the one relative who had always seemed slightly distant, slightly sad. She looked startled when I asked about my birth. "Why are you asking now?" she said. "Because things don't add up." She hesitated, then smiled thinly. "You know how your mother is," she said. "Sensitive. Sensitive." Everyone had a word. No one had the truth. The psychological toll crept in quietly. I stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. Food tasted like cardboard. I jumped whenever my phone buzzed. I began second-guessing my own reactions, wondering if maybe they were right, if stress had twisted me into something suspicious, paranoid. Gaslighting doesn't need lies shouted at you. It just needs enough doubt whispered often enough. One night, my mother called. "I'm worried about you," she said. "You sound different lately." Different. "I'm trying to understand who I am," I said. "You're our daughter," she replied quickly. "Why isn't that enough?" "Because I don't know if it's true." I didn't say that. Instead, I said I need my records. There was a pause. "I don't know why you're digging," she said softly. "But it's hurting us." There it was again. Us. Not me. Not my confusion. Their pain. When the call ended, I sat on the floor and cried until my chest hurt. Not because I missed them, but because I realized something irreversible had happened. Trust doesn't snap all at once. It erodes. Grain by grain. Lauren sent me a message that night. I found the social worker's name. My breath caught. She handled both cases. Same day. Same file prefix. My hands trembled. "They separated us," she wrote. "On purpose." I stared at the screen. The investigation had crossed a line. This was no longer about if I was adopted. It was about why. And who decided my life could be rewritten without my consent. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. For the first time, the face looking back at me felt unfamiliar, not because it wasn't mine, but because I finally understood something vital. My identity had been constructed, and someone somewhere had made choices about me long before I could speak. The truth was no longer hiding. It was waiting. And I knew the next thing I uncovered would break something for good. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. Documents with missing lines. Voicemails returned too late. People who suddenly couldn't remember. And every fragment cut. Lauren was the one who finally cracked the system, not through force, but persistence. She had learned something I was still struggling to accept. Institutions don't respond to emotion. They respond to procedure. She filed a formal request with the county for access to sealed adoption-related records, citing medical necessity. I filed one too, copying her language word for word. When that didn't work, she appealed. When the appeal stalled, she contacted an advocacy group specializing in closed adoptions from the late 80s and early 90s. That was when a woman named Marjorie called me. She introduced herself calmly, professionally, like someone who had made this call many times before. "I can't promise answers," she said, "but I can promise context." We met in a small office that smelled like old paper and coffee. The walls were lined with filing cabinets. Every drawer labeled. Every label neat. Order built on other people's chaos. She spread out copies of documents on the table between us. Redacted. Stamped. Official. Closed adoptions from that era often involved discretion, she said carefully. Especially in cases involving young mothers, medical complications, or multiple births. Multiple births. The words landed like a weight. You were born 2 days after Lauren, she continued. Same hospital. Same attending physician. Same social worker. I stared at the paperwork. This says private placement, I said. What does that mean? It means arrangements were made outside the standard foster-to-adopt pipeline, she replied. Often quietly. Quietly. My stomach churned. Your adoptive parents, she said, were approved quickly. Unusually quickly. I swallowed. Because they knew someone, I said. She didn't correct me. Your birth mother was 19, Marjorie continued. She was admitted under an assumed name. My hands curled into fists. Why? I asked. She was scared, Marjorie said. And she was pressured. By who? She paused. The people who told her it would be easier if no one ever knew. The room felt suddenly too warm. They told her, Marjorie went on, that keeping both babies would ruin her life. That separating them would give them both better chances. My chest ached. Did she want that? I asked. Marjorie met my eyes. No, she said. The word shattered something in me. She asked for updates, Marjorie continued. She asked if the babies were okay. She asked if they were together. Together. I closed my eyes. And? I whispered. She was told what she needed to hear to survive the decision, Marjorie said gently. I understood that phrase immediately. What she needed to hear. A lie shaped like mercy. I drove home in silence, the documents sitting in the passenger seat like a second presence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I needed the quiet to keep from screaming. That night, I confronted my parents again. Not with questions. With evidence. I laid copies of the documents on the kitchen table. My mother stared at them like they might explode. My father didn't sit down. This isn't what you think, my mother said immediately. Then tell me what it is, I replied. Her hands trembled as she picked up one page. You weren't supposed to find these, she said. That sentence said everything. You adopted me, I said. Didn't you? Silence. Yes, she whispered. The word felt unreal. Like it belonged to someone else's life. You lied, I said. My father finally spoke. We protected you. No, I said. You protected yourselves. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We wanted a baby, she said. We were told this was our chance. And my sister? I asked. What about her? She flinched. We didn't know about her at first, she said quickly. By the time we did, everything was already arranged. That's not what the documents say, I replied. Her shoulders sagged. We were told separating you is best, she said. That it would be cleaner. Less confusion. Cleaner. I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. You erased half of my existence, I said. That's not clean. That's violence. My father raised his voice. You were loved, he shouted. You had a good life. At the cost of the truth, I said. My mother sobbed openly now. We were afraid you'd leave, she said. That you'd hate us. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You should have been afraid I'd never know who I was, I said quietly. That night, I went home and called Lauren. I told her everything. She cried. I cried. We cried like children who had been separated too early to remember what they lost. They made a choice for us, she said, before we could even breathe. I don't know how to forgive this, I admitted. You don't have to yet, she said. You just have to survive knowing. I lay awake afterward, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a 19-year-old girl in a hospital bed, being told lies dressed up as kindness. Thinking about two babies placed into different arms. Thinking about a life that ran parallel to mine, close enough to touch, yet deliberately kept out of reach. The truth didn't set me free. It caged me with grief, rage, and a new, unbearable awareness. My parents hadn't just adopted me. They had agreed to forget half of me. And now that I knew, nothing, absolutely nothing, could ever be the same again. The day I met Lauren, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Not because I was afraid of heights, but because I was afraid of the drop into a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about myself. We agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Neutral ground. Public. Safe, at least in theory. I arrived early, pacing the sidewalk, replaying every conversation we'd had over the past month. Every DNA confirmation. Every document. Every subtle lie I'd unearthed. And still, nothing could have prepared me for seeing her. She looked like me. Not in a costume or a shared hairstyle, but in ways I couldn't unsee. The slope of her nose, the shape of her hands, the faint curve of her lips when she smiled nervously at the barista. My own reflection, scattered across a different life. She saw me first. Her eyes widened. Recognition. Something between shock and relief. We froze for a moment, like two halves of a puzzle finding each other after decades. She began, then stopped. Hi, I said, my voice breaking before I intended. Hi, she whispered back. We sat down, a table between us, but it felt meaningless. The air was thick with unspoken questions, truths that had been withheld from us both. I can't believe this is real, I said. I know, she replied. I didn't think I'd ever find you. And now, here you are, sitting across from me. We laughed nervously, and it immediately felt hollow. Our laughter was a fragile attempt to cover the tension coiling in our chests. I've gone over everything, I said, sliding the folded documents across the table. All the records, the social worker notes, the hospital files, it's all here. They knew about us. They separated us on purpose. Her hands shook as she reached for them, touching the papers like they might burn. I know, she said quietly. I felt it even before seeing the records. Something was missing in my life, like there was a ghost in the room I didn't know the name of. Now I do. I swallowed hard. Ghost. That's exactly how it felt, like half of my life had been stolen and placed somewhere else, living parallel to mine. We talked for hours, sitting in the corner of the cafe, ignoring the world around us. We exchanged stories from childhood, comparing notes on our parents, our routines, the subtle differences that only became glaringly obvious after the DNA results. My parents never mentioned you, I said, voice tight. Ever. Same, she replied. It was like you didn't exist. And for a while, I thought maybe. I was imagining the connection. Like maybe it was my own obsession. No, I said firmly. It's real. We're supposed to be here together. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I've thought about you every day, she admitted. I saw you in pictures, in faces on the street, in the DNA matches. I felt this pull, like you were out there and I had to find you. I understood that pull. I had felt it too. The gnawing sense that something was wrong, that my life was incomplete, that someone had rewritten my story without permission. We were twins separated by force, living lives shaped by strangers' decisions, and yet we were still the same at our core. The cafe emptied around us as we talked, the afternoon light fading. And then, for the first time since receiving that 2 a.m. message, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a small, cautious hope. Not that everything would be fixed. Not that the past would be erased. But that I had found her. That part of me that had been missing wasn't lost forever. As we stood to leave, I reached for her hand. She hesitated, then allowed it. The warmth of her palm in mine was grounding. Real. Human. Proof that despite the lies, the manipulation, the years of absence, we existed. We have a lot to do, I said, voice steady now. We do, she agreed. But neither of us spoke about how heavy the weight of the past was. How much betrayal and silence we had to process. How much of ourselves had been stolen. We only knew one thing for certain. We had each other now. And that, I realized, was the first real step toward reclaiming the halves of our lives that had been stolen. Finding Lauren did not heal me. That was the lie I told myself at first, that once we met, once we touched hands and proved we were real, the worst part would be over. That closure would arrive neatly, like a final chapter that explains everything before gently ending the story. That isn't how truth works. Truth doesn't close doors. It removes walls. And once they're gone, there is nowhere left to hide. In the weeks after meeting Lauren, my life began to unravel in quiet, humiliating ways. I forgot appointments. I reread the same paragraph 10 times without absorbing a word. Sometimes I would stand in a grocery store aisle and forget why I was there, my mind drifting to a parallel version of myself who had grown up calling someone else mom. Identity collapse isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It's disorienting. It's waking up one morning and realizing you don't trust your own memories anymore. I started questioning everything. Was my love for my parents real or conditioned? Were my preferences my own or shaped by gratitude I never consented to feel? Had my personality been nurtured or curated? When my mother called, I let it go to voicemail. When my father texted, I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I wasn't angry all the time. That would have been easier. I was hollow. Grief arrived in waves I couldn't predict. Sometimes it hit me while brushing my teeth. Sometimes while laughing at something stupid on television. I would suddenly remember that there was a version of my childhood where Lauren was there, where birthdays were louder, where secrets were shared, where I wasn't alone in ways I'd never had language for. And then I would remember that someone chose to take that from us. Not by accident. By design. Lauren and I talked often. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes not at all. We learned each other slowly, cautiously, like people touching a bruise to see how tender it still is. We shared similarities that felt eerie. The same nervous habits. The same sense of responsibility for other people's feelings. The same fear of being too much. And then the differences. She had grown up knowing she was adopted. I had grown up believing I was chosen and born. She had learned early how conditional love could feel. I had learned it late and all at once. Sometimes she envied my childhood. Sometimes I envied her honesty. Neither of us won. The final break came the night my parents asked to see me together. "We need to talk," my mother said on the phone, her voice careful, rehearsed. I agreed, knowing exactly what would happen. They sat across from me at the same kitchen table where the lie had finally cracked. My mother cried. My father stared at his hands. We did what we thought was right, my mother said. Can't you see that? No, I replied. You did what was easiest. She flinched. We loved you, my father said quietly. I know, I said. But you also controlled the truth. And love without honesty isn't protection, it's ownership. Silence followed. Then my mother said something that ended whatever hope I had left. If we told you the truth, she whispered, we might have lost you. I stood up. You lost me anyway, I said. That was the moment I became something new. Not their daughter in the way I had been before. Not the obedient version of myself built around gratitude and silence. I walked away not because I hated them, but because I finally understood that staying would require me to erase myself all over again. After that, there was a stretch of time I barely remember. Therapy sessions. Long walks. Nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations that no longer had answers. I mourned the parents I thought I had, the life I thought was mine, the certainty I would never get back. But grief changes shape if you let it. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild, not from the story I was told, but from the facts I could verify. My name, my body, my voice, my choices. Lauren, and I didn't try to replace what was lost. We acknowledged it. We named it. We carried it together. One afternoon, months later, we stood side by side in front of a mirror. Two women in our 30s, looking at reflections shaped by different hands, different lies. You know, she said softly, they didn't fail completely. I looked at her. We found each other, she continued. Despite everything. She was right. They controlled the beginning of our story, but not the ending. I am no longer the woman I was before 2:13 a.m. That woman believed identity was something inherited and unquestionable. I know now it is something you fight for. I live with fractures, with unanswered questions, with a grief that doesn't fade but evolves. But I also live with truth. And truth, even when it destroys you, leaves space for something real to grow. I was adopted. I was separated. I was lied to. But I am not broken. I am finally, painfully, deliberately becoming myself. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more real, untold stories like this. Like the video so it reaches someone who may need to hear it. And if this touched something personal for you, leave a comment. Even a few words matter. Thank you for listening.